let's explore something here that I think is rather interesting, and I think I understand why, but this is just my opinion. Study it, dig for yourself. It says in Exodus 40, verse 1, starting in Exodus 40, verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month you shall set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. To me, that is very significant. On the first day of the first month. Why is the first month interesting? Because it's the time of Passover. In the first month. When was the temple dedicated? Let's go to 2 Chronicles 6. You can see it in Kings too. But 2 Chronicles 6. Where it says, that's First Chronicles, 2 Chronicles 6. He's giving Solomon is giving a prayer, and it goes from verse 12 all the way through verse 40. And it talks about that he got up on then he stood, verse 12, then he stood before the altar of the Lord in the presence of all the assembly of Israel, and spread out his hands. Now Solomon had made a bronze platform, 5 cubits long, 5 cubits wide, 3 cubits high, and had set it in the midst of the court. And he stood on it, knelt on his knees in the presence of all the assembly of Israel, and spread out his hands toward heaven. Which, he was going to pray, which I find that really interesting, the way he does that, which is another video in and of itself, and I've kind of done that when I come to talking about prayer. And you read that whole prayer, which is important for you to read. Then we read in 2 Chronicles 7. Now when Solomon had finished praying, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. The priest could not enter into the house because the glory of the Lord filled the house. And you read later in 2 Chronicles 7, this tells you about the timing. So Solomon observed the feast at that time for 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great assembly who came from the entrance of Hathman to the brook of Egypt. On the 8th day they held a solemn assembly for the dedication of the altar. They observed 7 days and the feast. Then on the 23rd day of the 7th month he sent the people to their tents, rejoicing, happy of heart, because of the goodness of the Lord had shown to David and to Solomon and to his people. And then that's where you get into 2 Chronicles 7:14 when you read that in context. But the 23rd of the 7th month. Why? They're doing all this during the 7th month, which is the time of Sukkot, time of Feast of Trumpets, time of Atonement, and Sukkot. Why does this matter, though? I believe when you read about Yeshua saying, "It is finished," he was paralleling what happened with Moses in Exodus 40, where he says, "It is finished," and the glory of the Lord comes upon it. I think that happens with us. And why would a tabernacle, why would the tabernacle be dedicated at Passover, and the temple be dedicated at Sukkot? I think there's a very significant reason for that. And it has to do with the fact that you have that we are in a wilderness, and we are tabernacle of the Holy Spirit. It says temple, but maybe it means tabernacle. Perhaps. I don't know the language. But perhaps we are a tabernacle of the Holy Spirit in the wilderness that is life. But we will be a temple of the Holy Spirit, like it says, to be living stones. That we become part of the temple at Sukkot when the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles is fulfilled. Because we're still waiting on that. He came and he fulfilled the first part of the first part of the Jewish wedding, the Hebrew wedding. I would refer to it as the Hebrew wedding, but it's probably most commonly known as a Jewish wedding. But you had Passover, which was the bread and the wine. I mean, and you could do the whole Seder, but the bread and the wine, for the purposes of this discussion, the bread and the wine was what happened when a woman accepted the groom's marriage proposal. And you had first fruits. He fulfilled. Then you have Shavuot or Pentecost, which is when the ketubah is signed, of betrothal. That's when it's signed. And he says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And by the way, we will also see in Nehemiah 8, verse 14, they found written in the law how the Lord had commanded through Moses that the sons of Israel shall live in booths during the feast of the 7th month. So they proclaimed and circulated a proclamation in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, go out to the hills and bring olive branches and wild olive branches, myrtle branches, palm branches, and branches of other leafy trees, to make booths as it is written. Well, why would they be making booths if it wasn't the time of Sukkot, tabernacles? But why? Where was the temple built? The temple was not built in the wilderness. It was built in the land, in the promised land. The tabernacle was in the wilderness, which we are in as a part of our life. The temple is built in the promised land. And if we are a temple, we'll be in the promised land. If we are living stones of the temple, then that happens in the land of Israel. So that is just something that I find very, very interesting and worthy of study, and that you would dig and seek to understand it and see how it matters, see how it applies to your life. So shalom, shalom.